There are a huge number of reasons that are often pointed to when it comes to racial inequities that exist in society today. Many point to, of course, 1619 and America's original sin when the slaves were brought to Virginia. Others focus on more recent elements of our history, like the Jim Crow laws. You, of course, focus on residential housing. Why did you feel compelled to write this book?
Well, I spent many years as an education reporter, writer,
Mm.
columnist. Uh, I came to conclude that the biggest problem American education faced today, public education, was the segregation of schools. When we concentrate again, the most disadvantaged young people in single schools, uh, those schools can't possibly succeed. They can't possibly deal with the overwhelming social and economic problems that children in those neighborhoods come to school with that prevents their learning. I remember writing one column. I was a columnist for a while about asthma. African American children have asthma at 4 times the rate of middle class children, 4 times the rate.
Mm.
They have asthma because they live in more polluted, more dangerous neighborhoods, more vermin in the environment, more dilapidated buildings, more homes that aren't well maintained. And if a child has asthma, there's a chance greater than for a child who doesn't have asthma that that child will be up at night wheezing, come to school sleepless, drowsy the next day. If a child has asthma and is coming to school drowsy, that child is not going to pay attention as well as a child who comes to school well rested. And I went through example after example of these kinds of conditions, whether it's asthma or lead poisoning or homelessness or economic insecurity in the family, parental unemployment. And you take these conditions and you create schools where every child has one or more of these conditions. It's inconceivable that school is going to perform well. Well, it follows that if we want to reduce segregation of schools, reduce the concentration of disadvantaged children in these schools, we have to do something about the neighborhoods in which the schools are located, because that's the reason that schools are segregated. So I began to think of residential segregation as an educational problem. And I began to look into it. 10 years later, I've stopped writing about education and only write about housing policy because it's such an enormous problem that I hadn't appreciated the extent of which until I began to look into it in this way.